You know, growing up, I heard the same thing all the time. Darius, eat your dinner first and then you can have dessert. Well, the times have certainly changed, and I, for one, am tired of hearing that line. I love to have dessert sometimes before dinner, but listen, it's gotta be a really good, really sumptuous dessert. The kind that you lick your fingers and then lick the plate, because that is the only kind of dessert that qualifies to be eaten first. My perfect caramel cake is a cinch to make. I'll start by making the easiest vanilla buttermilk cake ever. It's a 3-part recipe where you just dump and stir and it comes out perfect every single time. The cake is good, but the frosting is even better. It starts with real caramel and then we add tons of powdered sugar until it's whipped to absolute perfection. There is absolutely nothing wrong with this dessert. And of course, everything we do, you know, it's gotta be simple, easy, delicious, and just good food. So let's get started. I am probably going to make for you what is really, honestly, one of the easiest cakes you've ever had in your entire life. And I know I know it's difficult sometimes when people say that they can't bake, but I gotta tell you, this recipe is so simple. It is literally foolproof, and you literally cannot mess this cake up. It is the perfect caramel cake. So here's what I'm gonna do. Starting with some of the wet ingredients, right? There's none of that whole mixing together the butter and the sugar and creaming it until it's ready. This is a whole different approach to how you make cake. I'm telling you, it's super simple, super easy, and you're gonna be like, oh, I can do this anytime. So I'm starting with buttermilk. So I put 1.5 cups of buttermilk into the bowl, okay? And I'm gonna measure out 1 cup of oil. Now I'm gonna use a non-flavored oil. This is gonna be your vegetable oil, your canola oil, corn oil, things like that. Stay away from any of the oils that's gonna have a flavor component to it, like an olive oil or a grapeseed oil, right? Because that's just not gonna be good. Avocado oils, none of that's gonna work in this particular cake, all right? So in here, I've got buttermilk, I've got oil, and I've also got the sugar. So I'm just gonna use a spoon. I'm not even using a big mixer. I'm using a spoon to stir everything together, just to show you just how simple this recipe for this cake is, all right? So we're gonna do it in 3 parts. This is the first part. So just stir it together until your sugar sort of evaporates, okay? Then we're gonna add in the eggs and vanilla. 2 eggs and some vanilla are gonna go into the bowl. Simple, I told you, right? This really sort of reminds me of how I grew up. I grew up a church kid, always going to church every Sunday, the Baptist church my grandmother had me in. And on Sundays, some Sundays rather, we would have bake sales to raise money for like the building fund or whatever the case may be. And we used to have a couple of people in the church who were really good at baking. And we had one lady in particular who recently passed away, Fanny Burgess. And she was known, okay, absolutely known as the cake lady down to the church. I don't know what she did. I don't know how she did it, but the cakes used to always be so incredibly moist. They used to be so incredibly flavorful. And this is how you tell if it's a good cake. You tell if it's a good cake by the way that it crumbs. So if you take the cake and you sort of like pinch it down, if it springs back on you, or if you take the back of a fork and sort of press down and it springs back, that's how you know it's a super moist cake. Fanny Burgess, I gotta tell you, may she rest in peace. Whew, she used to make some of the best cakes I literally have ever had in my entire life. So this recipe is pretty similar to hers, right? So I'm paying homage. Some of the classics you can never sort of get just like the originals used to do them, but this is my way of paying sort of homage to what was really the supreme, okay? The creme de la creme of cakes. So here's what I've done. I've done it in 3 parts. The first part was very simple. It was some of the wet ingredients plus the sugar, all right? I use oil, not butter, because we're gonna make sure we have a very nice, moist cake, okay? Then I added in 2 eggs along with our flavoring component, which was a little bit of vanilla, all right? Then I finished off with the last of the dry ingredients. So that was a little pinch of salt to help bring out the flavor, obviously, and then some baking soda for the rise, and then 2.5 cups of flour to bring the whole thing together. Now you're gonna see a few little lumps in the cake. Don't worry about it, because what's gonna happen is that as it bakes up, the lumps are going to disappear. And look at this, okay? We have literally the most perfect vanilla buttermilk cake, just like that. All right, now that our cake mix is done, I'm gonna pour them into ramekins that have already been greased. These are so cute because they're little ramekins for individual sized caramel cakes. They're already greased. I'm gonna show you exactly how I grease them. To prep the ramekins, I take room temperature butter and run it around the inside of the pan really well. I use a disposable glove for easy cleanup. Then I add in a little flour and roll the flour around so it sticks right to the butter. Lastly, I dump out all the excess flour, and then the ramekins are now ready to go. Told you, couldn't be simpler. Here's the easiest way I can tell you how to get the cake mix out of the bowl into the ramekins without making a mess, because if you're like me, you make a mess. I use the measuring cup, the same one I use for my buttermilk and my oil, right? I just pour in enough of the cake mix to fill this all the way up, see? And then you don't make as much of a mess as you would normally make. Then the rest is simple. You just pour in the cake mix. Now this is gonna rise some, so I'm just gonna pour this up to about halfway through. So there's the first one, and here is the second one. Just that simple. All right, my oven's preheated at this point, 350 degrees. These are gonna go in for about 17, 18 minutes, or until a toothpick goes in the center and comes out clean. Now that our cakes are off in the oven and they're cooking up and the house is going to smell amazing, let's get started on the caramel. It is probably the easiest thing you will ever do, I guarantee you. All right, saucepan on medium heat is step number 1. And to our sauce pot, I'm just gonna dump in 1 stick of room temperature butter. As the butter begins to melt, I'm gonna dump in 1 cup of dark brown sugar that was lightly packed. I'm just gonna give it a stir until the butter and sugar become one. I'm also gonna stir pretty occasionally, because what I wanna do is I wanna make sure that the butter and the brown sugar have a chance to really sort of just come together and cook together to one really nice mixture. Now, after the butter and sugar have had a chance to cook together, what you want to do is turn the heat off. You want to add in a little bit of vanilla, and be careful because it's going to bubble up. Give it a stir. House is going to smell amazing. And then we're going to just pour in a little bit of heavy cream and then give it a whole good stir. And this is it. This is your caramel for the frosting that we're just going to allow to cool before we start working with it. All right, so our cakes are out of the oven and I've had a chance to let the caramel cool. So I'm gonna show you how to whip the caramel together. It is super easy to do. So I'm just going to, oh man, pour the caramel into, oh gosh, into a bowl. This caramel is cooled off nicely. You want to make sure you do this when the caramel is cool, because if you don't, you're going to have a wet, soupy mess on your hands. And this caramel is too luscious, it's too regal, it's too royal for you to mess it up like that. So get all the caramel out into a bowl. All right, and then we've got some powdered sugar, confectioner's sugar. It is all the same thing. So we're gonna add in powdered sugar I'm gonna try not to make a mess and get it all over everything. But we're gonna add in powdered sugar a little at a time while we mix it together until we get the perfect consistency. All right, and just when we get the powdered sugar incorporated, I'm not gonna go too far, but you can see it's very, very, very thick on us, right? Which is exactly what we wanna see. So to thin it out and to whip it together, we're gonna do a little bit of heavy cream. This is going to make the frosting luscious and juicy and whipped just perfectly. Just watch. What did I tell you? We have the perfect, luscious caramel frosting that you literally will ever have in your entire life. Oh man. Now the cakes are out, the cakes are cooled, so I think it's time to, first of all, let's give it we might as well taste it. I mean, you know. Oh man. Not overly sweet, whipped to perfection, perfect balance of caramel flavor. You're going to love this recipe. As I was saying, the caramel cakes are out of the oven, they're cooling, so now is a really good time to put the whole thing together and enjoy a slice of caramel cake. All right, here are the caramel cakes. They're nice and cooked all the way through. They've cooled off slightly. Still a little bit warm, but that's okay. So the way we do this is you just take a knife and sort of run the knife around the outside of the cake. That's going to loosen up the cake and get us exactly where we need to go with getting this cake out. Now we went through all the work of buttering and flouring, so we want to make sure that the caramel cakes don't stick, right? And this is our insurance policy, so I'm just going to go through, lift up. All right, let me grab the towel and do this. It's still a little warm. All right, and if we did this right, look at this. The cakes come out beautiful, 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 nice and golden brown. They come right out. When I talked to you earlier about Fanny Burgess and the crumb of the cake, you see what happens when you push down on the cake? It sort of springs back on you. That lets you know that we're in really good cake territory, all right? So let me get a spoon, because the frosting is, it's just a little bit of frosting on top and that's pretty much it, all right? So, but we're gonna pile some of this frosting on top, and while it's still warm, it's gonna drip down a little bit. Oh man. And this is gonna make for an amazing caramel cake, all right? Now, that's perfect. Let me get a fork. And let's get in here for a taste of this deliciously, still warm, gooey, luscious cake. Look at that. Oh man. Oh, look at that. Look at you see what I'm talking about? When I talk about the moistness and sort of how it springs back on you, perfect. I've got some cake. I've got extra frosting. Let me give it a try. Oh. I gotta tell you, if you tell me you can't bake, you're out of your mind. This recipe is so simple. The vanilla cake comes through as a winner every single time with that buttermilk and the baking soda, so it's gonna be nice and tender. That caramel with that warm vanilla cake is an absolute winner. You must give this recipe a try. Recipes like this are only available at one place. You know exactly where to go. It's www.dariuscooks.tv. Listen, y'all, okay, there are two things I want to tell you, as I always do. I need you to know food is my life. Life it's my food. Until next time, with food like this, I want to wish you happy cooking. From my heart to yours. Bye, y'all. That's good.